Jersey Shore Women in Tech is me and Brittany. We are the co-founders. So I'm Allison Lamano. I'm the product management lead at Define Logic. We also have Brittany Jacobs on the phone. She's a software engineer manager at Vidya. And then Jenna Gaudio, I'm not sure if Jenna is able to join tonight, but she is our executive director, and she is currently chief operating officer also at Vidya. Oh, there's Jenna now. Hang on. So a little bit about Jersey Shore Women in Tech for those of you who this may be your first time joining us. We were established in 2017 after being inspired by another Women in Tech event here in New Jersey. Our first event was held in January 2018, so we're coming up on 4 years. In February 2019, Jenna Gaudio joined us as executive director. And our mission is to support, educate, mentor, and develop a network for women in the information technology industry. We're focused on building and maintaining a local community that will fulfill the needs of women, both in tech personally and professionally. We also do some community outreach. We've sent girls from Asbury Park schools to coding and robotics camp. We've done that twice already, and I think we're working on the second session. Hang on a minute. All right, Esther is joining. You can follow us. We're on all of the social channels, so you can also join our meetup group to stay up to date on our events. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and like I said, YouTube, where we share our events, where we edit out all the personal information. We also have a private Facebook group. So this group is private. It's kind of like the community here, where you can come in and you can ask the community questions. If you got a new job or something you want to brag about, you can post that there. If you're looking for somebody to maybe go to another meetup with you, or maybe attend a class or a workshop, you can, try to find somebody there. We also share articles and blogs. If you're looking or hiring, that's also the place to post. And also, if you just need any help, advice, information, it's a great community. A lot of our members have found jobs and new opportunities, and made good friends through this group. We're also always looking for speakers. So if you or somebody you know is interested in speaking to our community, you can apply to speak on our website, JerseyShoreWomenInTech.com. There is a link to fill out a form for our speaker application. So feel free to do that. Or if you know somebody that you want us to reach out to that you think would be a good speaker, feel free to share that information with us also. Okay, and now a little bit on our sponsors. Our one sponsor is Literati. We have Jackie on the phone. Jackie, do you want to give it a little overview?
Sure, thank you. Okay, so Literati is a women-owned full-service marketing firm. We're located also on the Jersey Shore, and we were founded with the desire to create opportunities for business growth. Something that makes us stand out as a marketing firm is that we do individual custom marketing campaigns and plans for our clients. We aren't the pay-per-click, everything works for everyone marketing firm. We definitely interview our clients and then set up stuff that will work for them individually. And we do give marketing savvy tips. I will put it in the chat so you guys can review it and then implement it as soon as possible. And we are offering to all of our Jersey Shore Women in Tech members, we do offer a 30-minute live marketing session for creating a power profile on LinkedIn. We kind of just give you the tips and tricks to manipulating your LinkedIn profile so that you come up in top searches, whether you're in sales or you're looking for a new job, or you're just looking for the right specific type of networking connections, we kind of know how to manipulate your LinkedIn profile, and we are willing to give you a half hour of our time and kind of teach you those tips and tricks. So I'm going to put my email. You can contact me if you're interested in the 30-minute free session, and I'll put our marketing tip in there as well that you guys can start implementing after the meeting today.
Okay, great. Thank you. And our other sponsor is Vidya. Vidya is a music and media tech company located at the Bellworks campus in Homedale. Vidya powers the business side of music labels and media companies through an all-in-one platform that allows users to manage content, rights payments, and view reporting on analytics and revenue. Do you guys have any job openings, Brittany or Jenna?
Yeah, I think our hot jobs right now are label and agency partnership manager, as well as some senior data engineers. I don't know that. I think that's okay. Cool. Yep. So I could post the link to that as well.
Okay, great. All right. So next month, our event is going to be Tuesday, December 21st. It's the 4 C's of peak performance with Val Jones, motivational speaker, peak performance expert, and author. Very, very interesting topic. Val, she has a very interesting background. She was on her way to becoming an Olympic skater, and an injury derailed her path. So that's gonna be a very interesting one. So if you can make it, please do. Okay, and now for our main event, Human Trafficking and Technology. This is Jersey Shore Women in Tech number 44, if you can believe it. Bella Huunaki is here with us. And I'm going to pull up your presentation, Bella. If you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everybody about your background while I pull up your presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining this evening. Nice to meet you all. And thank you, Jersey Shore Women in Tech, for having me. I'm super excited to be here to speak with you and to just share a little bit of what's going on my side of advocacy. My name is Bella Huunaki. I'm originally from Togo, that's in West Africa. I grew up in Michigan. I used to live in Jersey. I was actually trafficked in Newark, New Jersey when I was about 9 years old. And yeah, so I graduated from Western Michigan University with my master's degree, and now I reside in Washington, D.C., where I work with the federal government, doing a different process, non-human trafficking related, but my passion is advocacy for trafficking survivors, micro level and macro level, advocating for human rights to include survivors of crime, domestic violence, human trafficking, and child and labor exploitation. So I'm super excited to be here with you. This is going to be like an interactive conversation, so that it doesn't feel like a lecture. I do a lot of speaking things, and sometimes it feels like I'm lecturing. So I like to just engage you all a little bit. So Allison, I don't know if you have the presentation pulled up already, but I want to start this conversation by asking you what comes to mind when you think human trafficking, and use the chat box to record your answers. So the first one is, what comes to mind when you hear human trafficking? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Where did it go? Okay, here it is. Okay.
Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So what comes to mind? Use the chat box. Okay. What comes to mind when you hear human trafficking? Just anybody, whatever comes to mind, whatever comes to mind when you hear human trafficking. What do you think about? Kids getting pulled off the ground, playground, women and children. Yes. What comes to mind when you hear human trafficking? It's actually in our back here. Yes, that is true. Okay, any more thoughts when you hear human trafficking? Still happening, yes, absolutely. Kidnapped by somebody you think is your friend. Sex slavery, yes, yes. So all of those answers would be correct. Now, my second question, Allison, if you can skip to number 4 on the presentation. My second question would be, over the years, how has your perception changed when discussing human trafficking? Again, use your Jeffrey Epstein, honestly. Yes, Brittany, all right. Yes, yes. Classical narcissist, yes, yes. So what, over the years, how has your perception changed when discussing human trafficking? So when you think about it, there's a thought that comes to mind, but how has your perception changed? And if it hasn't, that's fine. That's what we're here today for. More awareness, yes. I used to think it was not in the US much. Yes. Is it getting worse? And why haven't we stopped it? Yes. Yes, that too. Disappointing. It's more common than we think. Yes. So every single thing you say is correct when discussing human trafficking. I use this term that it's a crime that has complexity of creating invisibility. Like it's there, but you can't see it. Like it's in front of you, unless you've trained your subconscious mind to see what's going on, you won't be able to notice it. Initially seemed unreal and unbelievable. Now it seems to be real. Yes. So everything you say is correct. Everything you say is correct. Allison, if you stop sharing your screen, I want to share mine with you for a minute. And this video I'm going to share with you is intending to, again, foreset our conversation tonight. And I want to also pinpoint why I even engage you all tonight. I think that there is a huge disconnect. So I'm in DC, I work for federal government, but I also do a lot of advocacy. I will probably do this for the rest of my life, to bring awareness and also to advocate. In my advocate spaces so far at federal level, I noticed that there is a huge gap. There's a lot of money that's been given to communities for awareness, but there is a gap in how technology, right? I share in the introduction, all of you talk about the different roles you play. Some of you are completely doing something that's not technology related, or you're more in the policy aspect of technology. So all of you at some point, your careers, either by day or by just like personal interest, cross-reference plays a role in actually what we call advocacy. So I'm gonna first, let me share this screen with you before we start. I start going deeply.
So I'm now pleased to introduce an incredible survivor.
Here it is. I'm a little bit challenged technically. So let's see if I can. Can you see this screen? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So this is the previous administration appointed me to this council, which I'll talk about in a minute. And what we do is that it composes of 10 to 14 survivors from all over the country. And what we do is we meet with each federal agency, Department of Treasury, Department of Agriculture, and every department, Department of Homeland Security. And we want to see what government is doing high level to combat it. And so I'll get into that after this.
Pleased to introduce an incredible survivor and the newest member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, Bella Huanake. Hi, Bella.
Good afternoon. My name is Bella Huanake. Thank you, President Trump, Ms. Ivanka Trump, in the White House for organizing this important event. It is truly a great honor to be here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. At age 13, I was brought into this country. I survived trafficking along with 19 other girls. Afterwards, I was placed in foster care. But this negative experience in my past should not wholly define who I am today. Today, I am a college graduate. Today, I am an American citizen. And today, I stand before you as the newest member of the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. The council is composed of survivor leaders who bring their experience and expertise to advise and provide recommendations to the President's task force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. We represent a diverse range of backgrounds and experiences, and we're sincerely grateful to this administration for appointing our current 8 members to support federal government efforts to prevent and improve trafficking programs and policies. We view the existence of this council as a victory for trafficking survivors and the federal government. This council is a model for survivor empowerment and survivor-centered approaches that other countries, states, and localities may learn from and adapt. This council shows in real and tangible ways how survivors can positively impact and inform anti-trafficking efforts at the highest levels of government. To truly be survivor-centered and informed means to not only prioritize survivors' needs or wishes and service delivery, it must also include meaningful collaboration with survivors to inform the design and implementation of the very policies and programs that affect them. No survivors should ever be viewed by their trafficking or lived experiences alone. We acknowledge the great strides the federal government has made in the last 20 years to combat trafficking, as well as that of other stakeholders. We look forward to continue to advise and collaborate with the task force to realize the goals of the TVPA, and we encourage all of you to view our 2020 annual report, which will be released this April. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. And to end, I would like to share a statement and a quote from our council's chair, the Honorable Judge Lone Robert. This is to the victims and survivors out there. It's never been your fault no matter what. So let go of that toxic shame. It doesn't belong to you. You're never too old, too lost, or too broken to begin healing today. Hope is key, and even if it starts out as small as a mustard seed, nurture hope. It'll save you. And most importantly, you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you,
Yes, thank you.
So I shared that with you to give an insight of what the council is about. So every year we have to produce a report to Congress on what we're doing as a council. Our one job is to go to each state and meet with state governments to evaluate and assess what they're doing each state. So New Jersey, New York, whatever, to see what they're doing to combat human trafficking in the state. And then we write a report to Congress to say, hey, Congress, we went to New Jersey, this is what's going on, this is what they need from you. And so in my effort of doing that, each person on the council can do, we just do our report, which led me to you all, because I think that the policies that are being made are written by men. The advocacies that are needing to happen are being produced. And I'm so sorry for the men on this panel. This is not an attack on you. This is just what bureaucracy and corruption in power looks like. So this is not an attack on you. But I tried to find a group of like-minded, people that have interests of protecting the most vulnerable in our communities. And so which was led me to you. So Allison, if you could go back to the presentation and slide number 5, please. And so in our time today, one of the things I want to focus on is, again, we're going to start with what is human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? how is the misuse of, how are traffickers misusing technology to really facilitate their activities, and the role of technology in countering trafficking in persons. So we'll go to the next slide. We're gonna skip that actually. Go to the slide number 7. Okay, so there is a law called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And that law was the first one of its kind. Before that law, anybody who was trafficked or exploited was not recognized as a victim. So that's when you hear a lot of things like a 14-year-old being referred to as a prostitute. There is no such thing as a 14-year-old prostitute. Prior to this law, a child as much as 10 years old, if found or discovered or arrested, they called them prostitutes, or people who are 14, because human trafficking is not just labor, it's not just sex, it's also labor. And so employers engaging in human trafficking are fined. Instead of prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, they're fined for labor exploitation instead of labor trafficking. So this law, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, and its subsequent reauthorization defines human trafficking. First, it defines sex trafficking as a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, coercion. And so in this case, usually the person has not attained 18 years old. So again, there can never be such thing as a 13-year-old prostitute who's exchanging sex. So this law solidified that. And also that force, fraud, or coercion protects victims of all kinds, including people who are over 18 years old. And this law also defines labor trafficking, because whenever you have labor, you also have sex. Traffickers don't have a moral code where they say, we're just gonna exploit you for sex, not labor, or we're gonna just exploit you for labor, not sex. Whatever makes the money, by all means necessary, is what they engage in. So this law also includes and recognizes labor trafficking, and is defining as the recruitment, transporting, provision, or obtaining a person for labor services through the use of fraud, force, or coercion. Again, if you hear me again, with human trafficking of any kind, there are 3 components: fraud, force, or coercion. And we find that in any and all victim. The last one that we don't often talk about in human trafficking spaces, with this law, there is the 4 Ps that we like to call it, is prevention, preventing people before they get trafficked; protection, protecting them after they're trafficked; prosecution, prosecuting people who facilitate. So those 2 will be buyers. And now in DC, what I'm doing, I am engaging in a lot of advocacy, federal level, to also prosecute not just sellers, but also buyers of sex equally. And so this is, and then the 4th one that we're, as a council that I mentioned, we're fighting for is policy and partnership. That's what we want to be added to the TVPA. Policy in terms of the TVPA has many reauthorizations, but government is not recognizing, elements and subcategories of profession like technology and making that a part of the law. It's so set in stone. And so we want to encourage partnership with people in tech industry and people and in any entrepreneurs industry, so that they are aware, and then they can join they can join as a stakeholder to combat trafficking. Next slide. So I want to talk about misuse of technology by traffickers. So the Department of State, government, federal level, creates a report every year of every state, and they go by rating. That's how people find out. I think someone mentioned New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Philly. They go by a grading system. And if you are a higher grade, that means that you are the most trafficked. People are mostly trafficked in your state. If you're a lower grade, that means that while people are trafficked, you're taking actions to combat it. And a lot of the states in the East Coast are very, very high on that list. And so I will encourage you to, if at your leisure, if you're really interested in this conversation, just Google literally Department of State's Human Trafficking report of any year. The video I showed you earlier was last year, January 2020, before the changes. So the report, what's the most recent would be this year, 2021. And so what they talk about is how that, they talk about countries in both internationally and domestic that and states that are impacted by the pandemic, and how traffickers this is like the perfect storm for them, because traffickers thrive best where there is vulnerability. And what COVID-19 produced is vulnerability. So the pandemic provided opportunity for traffickers to increase the use of internet, because we're all congregating on the internet and Wi-Fi, and particular social network and online gaming sites. So for those of you who are parenting, this is where I would say, really, really, this, I can't tell you how many times I've traveled to states, and, like we said earlier, people ask, I thought it was not in the US. I thought it was a third country phenomena. I thought the victims, I am an immigrant and I am a woman and I am a minority. So I look like the typical victim, right? But that's not it, right? Traffickers they're like chameleons. They can exploit anybody. I went to Nashville, and I met a girl whose father, a very prominent neurosurgeon, was trafficking her amongst his colleagues. And she doesn't look like anything like me. We don't come from the same social, ethnic, or economic background at all. She's an American. She grew up in a very middle class household, but she was trafficked by her parents. So in trafficking, there is something called familial trafficking, where parents traffic their children, or cousins, or churches traffic people in the congregation. So again, to going back, anyway, the pandemic has provided further opportunity for traffickers to exist in social network. And so we've learned that traffickers use technology to not just, the way recruitment work, because, trafficking is also a supply chain issue. So the way it works is that they are using technology to profile, to recruit and control and exploit their victim, using internet, especially dark website, or they will have, like the cryptocurrency, where like tracking these things, cryptocurrency, it allows them to hide undercover. And so, it makes it easier for them to receive and hide money, large amount of money, which would have otherwise been detected if they are transferring through banks like they used to. Now, with the increase of technology, they're able to literally hide in plain sight. So it's making it more difficult for them to be detected. And also the internet is also providing easy access to much large potential victims, children, not just girls, not just boys, children, child pornography. Somebody mentioned Epstein, he's disgusting, but he was not the end. He was just one of the faces. There are many, many faces to it, right? So what technology has done, the bad side of it is that it's provided access to many, many victims. So a lot of time when I'm on Facebook and somebody's saying, oh, there's a car at Walmart, it's parked there. It's like, that's doing a disservice to the movement, because traffickers don't operate like that. The data, it actually contradicts what they do. So now they're existing. So what they're doing is they have easy access to a larger group of potential victims, because traditional physical and geographic limitations no longer exist. You don't need to have a victim and you don't need to go to Utah to traffic victims. You don't need to go to New Jersey. They can be in Russia and traffic children who don't know they're being trafficked. They think they're just on a game system, but attracting their attention. Another thing they're doing, a way they're misusing technology, is they create fake websites. This is particular for people who are, usually fall victim to labor trafficking. They use fake website or post advertisement of legitimate employment potentials or social networking website like LinkedIn, right? To post legitimate posting, and somehow they are so they are literally expanding their victimhood pool that way. And so and also going back to the issue of child trafficking, some of them have literally a live chat box. And so, and it gives them immediate contact and opportunity to obtain information. Is another sense of fraud. Remember, fraud, force, coercion. They always want to touch based on one of those, either fraud, force, or coercion. If they can get your information to fabricate something, they can force you to do something and coerce you to do something. It requires a psychological manipulation where perhaps they have access to your images that are like maybe nude images, and they threaten to release them. So they start doing these little things to manipulate you. And by the time you know it, you're so far gone that you have no idea or option but to succumb to their demands. Like I mentioned, sometimes victims can be exploited through live streaming on multiple sites. And there's no limit on amount of time you can watch those videos. So they may have like a hub of, you know, I don't want to create complex trauma here. We were in one state where this person was exploiting minors, and they kept selling their videos over and over. It's like what do you call that? When you are betting, like you're saying, okay, I'll replay that video for $10, for $100. So they do stuff like that. And this is, again, children. And so, which led to, you know, because of this is a global, phenomena, and also one that is very concerning to us in the States. So the abuse of technology is making it very difficult for law enforcement to tackle the crime. You know, I don't usually use data on statistics because they can be manipulated a lot. So because of such a covert nature, when you look at the data, we always miss somebody. And we usually say that if one victim fall to human trafficking, that's too many. Like, nobody should be dealing with this right now, because we're much more developed as a society, and we just say no. Like, there's something that we all agree on, is that people shouldn't be exploited for money or sex. And so, so right now, the current live data that we have, there's approximately 40% of sex trafficking victims that are recruited since the pandemic. 40%, you guys. We've been in this pandemic for 18 months. So 40%, according to the Department of DOJ, Department of Justice, 40% in the Department of Homeland Security, 40% of sex trafficking victims were recruited online. And so that makes the internet the most common place where victim recruitment takes place. Before, it used to be juvenile centers. You know, when I was in foster care after I was trafficked, transitioned to foster care because there was nowhere for me to go, it used to be that they would target vulnerable population, women who are fleeing domestic violence, children who, you know, when I was in detention, most of those girls and boys there, you don't have anywhere to go. So, you know, if you see John outside and he's offering you a safe place to stay, or your parents are going through divorce, or you have a conflict with your parents and all sorts of issues, they exploit vulnerabilities. But now they no longer have to do that because people are online, they're sharing their pain online. And so it's like a data pool of, if I log in on Facebook or TikTok, whatever, I can detect who is a victim because of their data that they're sharing about themselves, and I can recruit them that way. So, which is what we're seeing, is that there's an increased amount of people that are being recruited online. So I'll talk about that later. So the Department of Justice, again, is a federal entity that they have a unit in there that prosecute these crimes. But again, one of the things that we are talking about currently we as again, the council, is how technology is used to commit what we're calling virtual child sex trafficking, which basically what this is that is when an offender, a trafficker, there's not a he, it's not a she. I've met women who are traffickers, I've met parents who are traffickers. And a human person, whatever gender they identify as, who sends a digital payment to a trafficker in another country. And the trafficker would then sexually abuse a child in front of a camera. So, it can be whoever, place X as a gender. And so this person will sexually abuse this child or this person, X person, it doesn't have to be a child, X person. Children are the most vulnerable victims to this. And they can send a live stream to someone else in a different country and you never know, right? So this is where I say there's a disconnect, because there's so many ways that these can be mitigated, but it requires awareness, it requires education, it requires advocacy from literally every single industry. Policy-wise, if you work, at Walmart, wherever you work, this is a global effort that requires all of us, because traffickers, they're very, very creative, very, very creative. I didn't share my story with you before I moved to the next step, because I don't think that my story is necessary, right? Because my story is that of, Jamie, who I met in Utah, is that of Vivian, who I met in Michigan. And the common denominator we all share is pain, is exploitation, is rape of identity, is scars that heal very intensely or never heal, is producing children through exploitation, is drug abuse because this is what you were fed, is pain. So sometimes when I speak, people ask, what is your story? Well, my story doesn't matter, because it's still happening. I'm talking to you now, but it's still happening. So there's no point of me sharing my story to get empathy for you so that you can have empathy for me, because there's not the point here. The point here is that I'm begging you to think of what you're doing in your element, to say, okay, maybe before I buy coffee, I will visit the DOJ goods produced by child labor. Department of Labor has this website where, so you don't support these companies, you look up goods produced by child labor. And when you view that list, it tells you employers, it tells you companies that use child labor for their items. So you don't support them that way. Maybe that's your advocacy. Maybe it's your advocacy is that you're really, really good at something, and you're gonna identify a shelter, a community. Every community has something related to trafficking. You identify it and you teach skills to trafficking survivors so that they have the skill they need, and you remove or you empower them so that they're not too vulnerable in that regard. Maybe that's your skill. Maybe your skill is education and speaking. Maybe you can go to the schools and actually have the real conversation, or host a community group where you educate yourself on what human trafficking is, and you go into the community and you do it. Because if you wait, right? I meet a lot of people and they tell me, well, what is the government doing? The government can only do so much, but it's up to you. We stand up. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of the policies are being written by men. A lot of laws enforcement are being written by men. And this industry, 90% of everything we do is usually the glass sealer is usually men. And also research and data shows that most people who benefit, although offenders don't have gender, most people who benefit from it are usually men of however they identify as. So this is where I ask, like, I go anywhere. I'll go to churches, I'll go to garbage disposal people and talk to them about their role in combating trafficking. Because I think, as somebody who was once exploited, I when I was in New Jersey, it was 22 of us. I was I mentioned in the video I was 13, but I was actually 9, and I never knew I was being trafficked. And most victims don't know that they're being trafficked, because the level of psychological manipulation says if you're a child, the youngest person was 5, when some things are being done, if you don't know normal, whatever normal that's introduced to you, that's what you're going to be assumed is normal. But that was in 2008. And so now we don't have to worry about somebody being in the basement. We just have to worry about access. And so what can you do in your capacity to kind of disrupt that access? By either education. Hey, if your parents are going through divorce, this is what you do. If you're a woman who is being, you find yourself in a domestic violence situation, you go to a shelter and somebody, approach you, this is what you do. This is what the resources are. And so how can you educate yourself so you can empower, right? So that's my little spill. Allison, if you could go to the second slide for me, please. So I mentioned a lot that, so how can we use technology to oppose human trafficking? Right now, there is a lot of really powerful tech companies that have formed a coalition, and I think it's called Tech Against Trafficking. And so that's how they're using, this is where they're using, this correlation is being used to kind of detect, prevent intelligence and gather intelligence, but it's impossible for any one government, one organization to collect all relevant information about human trafficking, because it's not a petty crime, right? A lot of time when you peel the layers, there are huge entities and people, Epstein, nasty, who are behind these things. Because again, fraud, force, and coercion usually is financial or sexual, which brings them pleasure. So there's no one government or organization that could do all of this. Instead, so these companies, they compile data, and so what they do is that they use these tools to provide useful report. But again, that's not enough, right? We can't stop there. Another one, as somebody talked about, I talked about supply chain earlier, and somebody talked about blockchain. So some companies and corporations have implemented blockchain technology to supervise their international supply chain, to hopefully decrease the human trafficking, the risk of human trafficking at every location. I talk about, especially in labor trafficking and agricultural settings, the biggest issue is supply chain. Companies, we as society, we demand, Allison, how am I on time? Okay. We as a society, we demand things a lot from, when you order something from Amazon, you're looking for like now. Well, there's a human person that is literally producing that to meet our effort of like instant access. There aren't robots, not that I know of, there aren't robots yet that can keep up with capacity. And so there are actual people who work 24 hours. There's recently, we had a gentleman that, the council was working with who was asked by a trafficker to do Uber. So what they did was they created an online profile, but they had this person driving around almost 24 hours to deliver. And so there are these spaces that you don't think that, like, there are people that are being exploited, right? And so what we say is that there's no hierarchy to exploitation. So we don't say, sex trafficking victims are more important than labor trafficking victims, or, there's also something called elderly trafficking, where people want to witness elderly sexual abuse for their own entertainment. So all these things are like, really dark phenomena that are taking place. So anyways, going back to supply chain accountability. So the Department of Labor, to increase their awareness on supply chain and hold third-party contractors who might use exploitation as means to facilitate their goods, blockchain technologies to use to mitigate that. And also there is the Stop app, and this is a first global app in multiple languages to report any suspicion or incident of human trafficking, slavery by, it's stop the traffic. And so it's basically a general goal to prevent and stop trafficking. So there are a lot of these, in terms of tech specific efforts and initiatives that are being executed to detect and effort to generate reports so that governments can be a part of eradicating trafficking. A lot of governments are also they are a part of traffickers that host this. So one thing we're working on is also prosecuting for these people who might not be domestic perpetrators, but international. So as I talk about recording of a child and streaming in a different country, having a coalition of a group that can prosecute these governments, regardless of where they are and who they are. We want to send a message loud and clear that we as society, we're saying no to exploitation of all kinds and of all people. Moving on to the next slide. So one thing that I've taken on that I think I mentioned to you earlier, how I think there's a gap. There's a lot of advocacy, but there's a gap. I don't think that the trafficking movement has invited technology to the table, and I think that we need to. I'm not a tech expert. I do nothing. I know nothing about tech. But one thing that I am hopeful for is increased collaboration between national, international, and private sectors of how technology can, again, guide the effort of, victim services, for example. Is there a way that victims can just like dial, is there an app? There is an app of victims trying to, if you want to locate a shelter, you can just type it in. Just like if you want to find a restaurant, you just Google it and see what kind of shelters are available. So those are kind of innovation things that I think we need to talk about more specifically for minor. Is there an app or funding or something in tech related? You all that have like big brain in tech, like what do you do your capacity that you think can benefit, right? When I was in juvie, I remember one of the biggest issues we have was like we used to run away a lot. And we ran away to anybody. As long as we're not in the environment we don't want to be in, we would run away to anybody. I mean, I was in Michigan, so Canada wasn't too far. The problem is once you cross the borders, you can't just turn around. So you have truckers that are, and so some of those people are engaging in trafficking, but you need a place to stay. You're not thinking about, I'm going to be exploited, you're just thinking about, okay, I'm cold and I need to be in somewhere. And so that's where it starts, like these little things, and that's where it starts. We talk to a lot of kids who, there was a 16-year-old girl from Texas that we were talking to. Her parents are going through divorce. They're both lawyers, and they're working so much that they're not paying attention to her. So she's chatting with anybody online, and they detect vulnerability. So they give her attention that maybe her parents are not giving her at home. And literally, that's all it starts. We have a council member who's a judge. I mentioned him. He's a judge. His own father exploited him. So is there like that house in your community? Where I was in New Jersey, it was a beautiful house, beautiful house. But you don't know what misery. You didn't know that 22 children were in that house. Beautiful. So if your gut reaction is telling you something, you might just save someone's life. Be nosy, be that nosy neighbor, because you just might save a life, right? So another way that technology can oppose human trafficking is, protections of victims' privacy when collecting, analyzing data. That's another way that I think that human trafficking technology can oppose human trafficking in terms of, a lot of time victims are, there might be some information about them that they either the law allow victims of trafficking to change their information so that they're not easily recognized by their traffickers for re-exploitation. So how can technology be innovative and safeguarding privacy? I think that's missing in the anti-trafficking movement. I think collaboration between national, there isn't, to this day, there isn't any system that that merge data across government. There isn't, zero. So we can't talk about data when there isn't a consistency in data reporting. So that's what, you have different numbers all the time. So how can technology aid efforts between national, international, and private sector emerging data? There isn't a host. There's so much money everywhere, but we need a host of consistency. So that's the only way that we can know what's happening by a large percentage, where and how can we better guide our effort. A strong legal framework to prosecute online trafficking activity. There's a lot of privacy information in terms of, there isn't a legal framework right now that outline, what protection look like under the law. So how can trafficking aid, how can technology aid that? And I think more tools and training for anti-trafficking groups, especially on technology, and how technology usually can be used to, one thing that I want to do is imagine that there is an opportunity for a victim to literally look up a service and it pop up and give them a number they could just call, instead of calling the community, waiting for a referral, and that takes months and weeks. And so there it goes again, and it's just like, it's like a cycle. It's like a cycle that just keeps repeating, right? Next slide. To kind of just transition before I answer any questions, this side is of, so my day job, I work for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I don't do anything human trafficking really. I do acquisition, so grant writing and all of that. And so, but they have an office called OTIP. So this will tell you about trafficking in persons for children in foster care, children in your community, children crossing the borders, and the number of them that are being trafficked. So all you hear about this last year or 2 years ago, you hear about the caravan. A large proportion of that are children who were literally, we had a mother who used her 17-month-old baby and stuffed her with drugs and was using her as a portal to transfer, like, oh, poor me. But, anyways, so the OTIP office talks a lot about that. The U.S. Department of State to monitor and combat trafficking. This is the office federally that's assigned to track activities across the state and also international. OTIP is usually limited to just domestic, and U.S. Department of State Office of Trafficking and Monitoring Combat Trafficking, it tells to you about, this year, what state has done what communities were most impacted. So a lot of this report is used by other agencies to understand. So that's where we get a lot of data and reporting from. Of this year, we have 44 people trafficked, or whatever the number is. And the last one is our DRS group. We have to produce a report to Congress every year. Our report is coming out in about a month. And we say, Congress, this is what we have identified, this is who we talk to, and this is what we have tried to bring awareness on. And we ask you that you support more laws on technology, privacy, and trafficking. We ask you that you support more laws and funding of victims shelter. We ask you to give more money so that people who are trafficked can receive mental health services. Women who were pregnant as a result of being trafficked can receive support for not just themselves and their children as well. Which will lead me to the last slide of question and answers. I see there's a lots I haven't caught up on, but I would take any questions you have at this time.
I think the best thing to do, because I know some people might have asked questions along the way that might have already gotten answered. So rather than go back over the questions, maybe we can have anybody just chime in with questions that they still have that haven't been answered yet.
I think mine was similar to Sherry's in the box, which was, I think the difference between how blockchain is helping us versus hurting us. Like there was a slide on how blockchain is being used to decrease human trafficking based off of like the supply chain. I would like love a little clarification on the difference between how it's hurting versus helping.
Yeah, so currently, I don't have any indication of how blockchain might be hurting. What we do know is that in terms of supply chain specifically, blockchain is being used to supervise like internal supply chains to hopefully decrease. So there hasn't been like a monitoring and evaluation to kind of gauge the effectiveness of it. Yet thus far, just on a micro level, it's intended to hopefully decrease the risk of activities for location hubs that people are mostly vulnerable to.
So it like hides the location, you're saying? Like I'm trying to understand how the blockchain technology prevents people from being trafficked.
So Department of Labor there are third-party contractors. So let's say McDonald's, for instance. Well, I mentioned McDonald's because they engage in supply chain. We do things with McDonald's, so I don't want them to think that they are being listed as people who are not following the laws. So for instance, McDonald's or any large food industry, let's say they get tomatoes from Mexico, and they want to, so some of these corporations, not McDonald's or other corporations, have implemented this blockchain technology to kind of supervise international supply chains to see who is, there's a specific requirement that they have to meet in order to transport tomatoes from Mexico to US for their food industry and production. So the data that's collected is usually to kind of detect if this is being used to exploit people in agricultural settings.
Okay, so they use it for like accountability.
Yes.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Somebody just asked if you think someone may be a victim of trafficking, what's the best way to help and who should you contact?
Yeah, so when you let's say you're if you are in a community where you think that somebody's being I'm trying to pull this up. If you've detected that somebody is a victim of trafficking or potential victim of trafficking, there's a hotline you call, and that hotline is 1-888-373-7888. So 1-888-373-7888. And so that's the human trafficking hotline. And they usually I call them, I feel like they know me by now. I call them about everything, anywhere. I'm like, wait. And so just, my gut feelings, once your gut feelings is telling you, there are usually, signs, they tell you signs, but traffickers are not like that oblivious. They're very covert. So if your gut is telling you something, better be safe than sorry. So call that number and say, hey. They will take your information and they will follow up with you. They will say, hey, we've identified this. Hey, this thing, but we thank you for reporting.
That's what I was going to say. Do they follow up and say, yep, we looked into it and you were onto it. You were onto something, or no, it's nothing is there.
Yes.
I have a couple questions that, I know you talked a little bit about like that there is an organization for a lot of the tech companies, but what are the tech companies, what are they doing to prevent, these live stream and trying to get these victims? Like, is there moderation going on? What tools are these giant tech companies using? Do you have any insight into that?
Right. So there isn't a standard law that requires these tech companies to actually you know, you identify, you somehow came across this is what you do. There isn't any of that. So they make a report to law enforcement. But again, law enforcement doesn't have jurisdiction for international. So this is where we come in. Advocacy means that we want laws that require, you know, you, Allison, somehow you got in, you know, you've recognized you came across this, and you don't need a probable, you know, the law doesn't need a probable cause for this. We witnessed this and we know clearly see this is wrong. So there shouldn't be any lingering processes that investigate.
Yeah.
This is clear. And so there isn't that. There's another one called Trafficked. So it's an app that you use to take a photo of the next hotel room you stay in and submit it to a database available to law enforcement to help identify like locations for victims. And so it's you know, it's Trafficked. You stay at a hotel, you take a picture. So if a victim was in that hotel, then it's easily identified, like, okay, you know, Allison sent us a picture of this. So it looks like this hotel. So we'll go there. So Trafficked is, you know, not just a hotel, it could be just specific hubs that, you know, that helps law enforcement easily identify where a victim could be, so they don't have to spend more time investigating.
Very, very interesting. And I'm sure that this is not the same, but does any of this tie into like cybersecurity laws, or is it completely different?
So this is another thing, is that big tech and, you know, cybersecurity law is like a never ending, right? And so this is where the gap is, because the laws do exist, they're just not related to cybersecurity and victims of trafficking yet. And there isn't a law that's created specifically for people who are abused. And so there isn't, as to this day, there isn't. So this is one of the gaps that I was talking about, that there's a whole gap between that. There are no laws that prevent this, or in terms of prosecution or policy side of things, it hasn't merged or married each other yet. So we need that like meshing to happen.
Very interesting.
So this is where your congressmen and congresswomen and your community, your mayors come from, because they are going to be your representative here in DC. And you talk about, you know, what are you doing in terms of advocacy on technology and human trafficking and merging the two? What is your effort? What is your plan? Because again, it makes advocacy much better if we have so many people who have brought this up already. So we're not fighting, we're just reiterating what's already happening in the communities.
I have a question, Bella, and you didn't really touch on it. I don't know if you feel comfortable speaking about it, but you didn't really mention government corruption. So if the people that were leaning on to help enforce these laws that we don't even have yet, but once we do, hoping that they enforce them, you know, if they're part of the problem, even part of the ring. I mean, you know, we saw from what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, like there were judges that were in his back pocket for various reasons. And so, you know, I don't know if you feel comfortable speaking to that end as well.
Yeah, you know, it goes back to what I was saying of, you know, I'm not, you know, I want to make sure that I'm speaking solely based on data, not conspiracies, because that would not be a disservice. But what we do know is that there are a lot of, I don't want to identify, I would just say there are a lot of government leaders, again, judges, people who are in powerful positions that either protect perpetrators of trafficking, especially if they have money, or they themselves engage and they have immunity, but the public is not usually exposed to it. And this is not usually general public knowledge, but this is where research comes from. I just want to give you an example. I was on Capitol Hill not too long ago here in DC, where a prominent leader was advocating for a removal of a language from a law that will protect victims. And if you keep peeling it, you know who this person is protecting, or there are people who right now in DC who are advocating for legalization of prostitution. That is a big thing that's happening right now. Right now, they are using victims of sex trafficking and telling them to advocate to legalize prostitution. And there is so many, you know, whatever you lean as, there's so many fundamental problems with that, because when it goes back, the victims don't win here. They don't win, right? They don't win. So there's these powerful groups of people, usually ones with money, that either support their friends with money who engage in exploitation or provide immunities for them. And so there is no accountability under the law for these people. The only accountability there is, again, is the local community. It starts with local, then it goes to state, then it goes to federal. And as soon as we know, we everywhere can send a message. But if we don't start local, it's like it's dead before it arrives in DC.
Yeah, because I guess my concern too, especially when you started talking about like, you know, what apps can we build to help, you know, people have resources, places to go, they can just like look it up. And I think too, like if, you know, if it's something that the government gets involved in or whoever, just like be able to maintain the privacy of these locations or these resources without like exploiting them to people who are looking for victims, and like that's the next place that they can then find victims. And it's where, you know, where there's corruption, that's, you know, a leak there too as well. So it's just I mean, these just seem like huge problems to solve, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of you know, agencies and communities, because then the jurisdiction is breaking down by local, state, and federal. A lot of these service provision providers, what they do is that they have like a building where that's just like the main stop. But then when the victim is there, then they take them to undisclosed locations. So whoever comes there will find food, a bunch of food, but they don't know what's happening to the victim after. So that's another way that they safeguard privacy information just to keep the victim safe. But like you say, there's a lot of things to consider for the safety of, like, you know, especially most vulnerable people involved.
Yeah, Sherry C had a piggyback question. With so much corruption in all branches of this current administration, so how do you tell who the good people to work with are?
Yeah, so this is everywhere in government. And so I don't think that, you know, here in DC, we say that human trafficking is not a partisan issue, right? That's one thing we can all agree on, that we should all agree on, whichever people identify as politically. The problem is that it didn't become political, right? But I can tell you, as somebody who survived it, I don't care which end of the aisle you fall on, unless you've lived it. It's a ghost that will, the scars are like a ghost that will forever haunt you. And so I don't care what side people fall in, as long as I know that you are supporting policies that are for the well-being and are of best interest of people who exploit it. That's my most priority. So in terms of who the good people are, we follow, you know, what they're supporting. So if I know that you're not supporting victims services or whatever, you know, then I know that you're not somebody who has victims' best interest in mind. But the biggest thing here is people who, you know, there's a quote that said that every child needs an adult that's irrationally crazy about them. And I think this goes back to general society, people who are exploited. And we recognize vulnerabilities about, you know, boys, children, women. They need people in industry that are irrationally crazy about their well-being and protection, whichever end they fall in. Because what happened is that these people eventually meet these victims again, but it depends on which side are you meeting them. You can meet them when they're at the end of exploitation. So this is heavily drugged, dying of something, or you can meet them when they are empowered and are ready to assimilate and have grown and are giving back. But if you meet them at first, you're going to meet them again. And you have to be able to look at yourself and say, because of my action, this person became this. Or because of my inaction, this person became this. And you ultimately have to choose which one you want to face.
Someone asked, how do you address religious or cultures who believe labor trafficking or underage marriage is okay?
How do you address religions and culture? I think prosecution, you can't prosecute people, but I think that a lot of time these are set organizations. So congregations protect each other. And I think this is where education comes from, because it's almost like a cult. It's almost like a manipulative mind control. And a lot of these cult leaders are narcissists. And so, it's education. It's education. If, I used to go, when I used to do community involvement for this work, I'll go to churches and I'll speak to the congregation and I say, you know what, if you have somebody in this church, I'm not saying you do, but if you do, speak up. You are saving lives. And so I think education, first, is how you address it, so that people, Brittany, you said something earlier, like, what you don't know. Right? That goes to people who are being trafficked. Some people don't know that they're being trafficked, because trafficked is the word that's used by people like me who are advocating. People who don't know they're being trafficked, they need to understand that what's going on with them is not okay, even if it's coming from the pastor or the church leader. They need to know that. So education, be comfortable having a difficult conversation. And also cultures who believe labor trafficking or underage is okay. Again, it comes, especially, I can only speak to US. There are laws that, people are held accountable. If the law goes right, people are supposed to be prosecuted. And so we can't eradicate trafficking in all these third world countries, but we can do something about it in US. Someone asked, where can we find the best educational sources to share? I would start with Department of State, because that's like federal and it hosts everyone. But I also would start with your local, because a lot of local get money from federal, so that they have to produce a lot of reports specific to that community. So literally Google in your community, Human Trafficking Advocacy Network or groups or organization, wherever you are in Jersey, I bet you there's one, if not 10 or 20 miles from you, and get that report specifically for your community. But if you want to know generally, I will direct you to Department of State OTIP office or Department of Health and Human Services Office of Trafficking in Persons. Where can we find? Okay, I already answered that. I'm okay with difficult conversation. Question, what about those in leadership who are not okay with difficult conversation? Leadership can only be a leader by the people. There will not be a leadership if there aren't people. Somebody has to follow your leadership. So if I had 20 people under me, if all those 20 people refuse, you dismantle organizations by targeting the heart of the people that they follow. So if you have an organization, a leader, whether it be church, you talk to the people. People elect leaders, not the other way around. Leaders work for the people, whatever they are, whatever alley, whatever political structure, they work for the people. And they always lose track of that. But we are the people, wherever we are the people. So you first target the heart of people, not the other way around. They're not working for you. You're not working for them, they're working for you. So you first target the heart of the people. And I speak specifically to churches, the evangelical care. I identify as a Christian, so this is passionate of mine too. The evangelical charismatic Christian communities that are so religious that they don't want to have a difficult conversation because it doesn't exist and they already pray out the devil out. No, you target the heart of the people, because ultimately the traffickers will come to you. It will be your children. It will be their children and their children. So you start, if anything, you target the hearts of those people and say, you know what? We said no more, because if you don't, somebody down your line is going to fall victim to it. And I'm telling you, I've seen it. So you target the heart of those people. That's how you have the difficult conversation about leaders who are not okay with it. Their discomfort cannot be at an expense of someone's life. That's just inconsistent. Just because you're uncomfortable, that doesn't mean that a victim somewhere is going to lose their life just because your ego does not allow you to have a difficult conversation.
Wow. Well, thank you, Bella.
Sorry, I just have one more question, Alice.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have a couple minutes. So any more questions? Let's wrap up.
when you had mentioned that 40% of recruitment comes online, and you talked a little bit about, I think you mentioned like Facebook or whatever, but is it mostly from social media? Like, is it because people are exploiting themselves as easy targets? Is that kind of where most of that comes from? Or is there like some other place that I'm not thinking of?
So what I mentioned 40% in terms of since the pandemic so far, 40% of people who fall sex trafficking victim are recruited online. This is speaking specifically to children, minor victims who weren't, they weren't intentionally trying to engage in a voluntary sexual exchange. These are children who they know that they are being groomed by traffickers.
I see.
This will be creeps who are commenting, "You're so beautiful." I wonder, your beauty is not recognized. And 16, 15-year-old whose environment is already chaotic, they tend to drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
Bella, that 40% is over what period of time, please?
It's about, what do you mean? It's been 2 years, so almost 2 years.
Okay, in the past 2 years, 40% have been through
Social media.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody have anything else that they want to ask before we wrap? Well, thank you very much, Bella. This was very insightful. Can you let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, or if they want more information, where's the best place to connect?
Oh, yes. Allison and everyone else, thank you so much for just creating a safe space for me to come share this with you. I'm really grateful. I am empowered by each one of you. You encourage me, first as a woman, to keep thriving in my respective, setting wherever I am. So I thank you for what you're doing both now and the future. And for all of you who want to reach out and connect, if you can find me on LinkedIn, Bella Huanake, send me a connection and I would, accept. But I really am grateful for allowing me to come speak to you today.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great.
Also, I'll say we'll share some of the links that Bella mentioned and ways to get in contact with her in our newsletter, as well as the offers from our sponsor, Leaderarty. And so if you're interested in signing up for a newsletter, you could get the link from you could go to our website and do that. You could also, there's a link to it on our meetup page as well. So if you're interested in a recap and resources, our newsletter is a great place to get that.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.